When the left analyzes the world, they look at poverty, then conclude that those who are living in poverty are victims of an unjust capitalist system. Oftentimes, leftist politicians run on this narrative entirely. They say that the poor are victims and they need welfare, food stamps, and so on, and the rich and upper middle class are to blame for the disparities in the have-nots' income. It's clear that the left has a few implicit assumptions within their ideology. The assumption is that A, there is evenness or randomness in people's income, and B, searching for causation is always searching for blame and therefore searching for a perpetrator and a victim. You can see this ideology play out in the political rhetoric liberal politicians, particularly socialist politicians, have. I have nothing against Bernie Sanders personally, and in fact I appreciate his genuineness in political discourse, but let's examine a quote from him that reeks of the class victimization ideology. Let us wage a moral and political war against the billionaires and corporate leaders on Wall Street and elsewhere, whose policies and greed are destroying the American middle class. So the assumption in this quote is that the rich, particularly corporate leaders and billionaires, are to blame for a crumbling American middle class. The problem with this quote, and many like it, is that it's just not true. First of all, the 1% is not an organization. There's not a fixed number of people who will continuously be designated as the 1%. So corporate leaders and billionaires can lose money in a free market system and not have the financial influence anymore. Secondly, and this is the more important point, what's causing the problem in the American middle class isn't really linked to the rich. It's linked to policies of governmental intervention in the free and open market. There are two reasons in particular why the American middle class is significantly shrinking. The first and less important reason why is having a high corporate tax rate. The second and more important reason why the American middle class is significantly shrinking is failed governmental policies. Number one, high tax rates on corporations and trading blocks. This is a very simple point that's often been overlooked and neglected by the political left. When you have a high corporate tax rate and trading blocks, those are blocks of free trade, companies tend to invest and trade and market and even sometimes move their finances and operations elsewhere. If Bernie Sanders wants the American corporate tax rate to be set at 40%, for example, but Mexican politicians want it to be set at 20%, well, many companies are going to move to Mexico because they can make more money in Mexico, and there goes all our jobs. Number two, failed governmental policies. When the government involves themselves in the free and open market, they have a habit of screwing things up royally. We've seen this in green technology investments, for example, where green tech companies that were government funded failed, but Tesla Motors and SpaceX succeeded under the guidance of Elon Musk's entrepreneurship. A more obvious example of government policies failing is within the housing market system. During the early 2000s, Democrats pushed for affordable housing. They had banks lower their standards by looking past people's credit scores, forgiving previous debts, and so on. Also, that the banks can give a loan to poor Americans so that they could afford a house. Liberals must have felt great giving poor Americans homes, but little did they understand they were creating a bubble of unpayable debt since these new homeowners couldn't pay off the loans they were receiving. Alas, the moment banks wanted their money back by asking these homeowners to pay for their mortgage, a crash ensued. An entire class of people, the lower and middle class, became worse off. In short, the practice the Democrats pushed the banks to do, that is, lower their general standards when giving out loans, led to the financial crash of 2008. It is true that many stockbrokers and Wall Street executives practiced fraud, which contributed to the crisis absolutely, and they all belong in jail. Should they have been bailed out by the government? Nope. But Bernie Sanders is scapegoating. The Democrats pushed for affordable housing. The Democrats are the ones who had the banks give out these unpayable loans to poor Americans. Thus, government is to blame for the crash. Wall Street and corporate America did not cause the crash. Government policies did. They took advantage of the government's naivety. So, in light of this, what lesson have we learned? Leave the free market alone. In a free market, these banks would have practiced caution before giving out loans. They would have looked at a buyer's credit scores and income, then decide whether or not a particular buyer is a safe investment. By doing this, there would have not been a crash. Why? Because the people they would have loaned to can pay them back. And B, corporate America and billionaires didn't cause the fire. In this most recent example, the crash and the fall of the American middle class is entirely caused by democratic policies of affordable housing that reeks of socialism, by the way. Bernie Sanders blaming the rich is scapegoating, pure and simple. So what are the lessons we've learned today, liberals? The first is that you're wrong. Blaming the rich in the financial crisis and the greater problems in the American middle class, like joblessness or lack of affordable housing, is scapegoating. It doesn't evaluate why the crash occurred, why companies leave the country and trade elsewhere. The second lesson is governmental interventions on the free market often has negative effects on people's lives you claim to be helping. We've seen this with the financial crisis of 2008, and we'll continue to see this so long as politicians like Bernie Sanders simply blame the rich. I'm Jay Feza from the Rebel.media. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the Rebel.media.